Lies and revenge on my cheating wife. It all started the night my wife and I threw a party for 30 of our friends and coworkers. The party started at 8 p.m., and by 9:30, Pam, my wife, was already pretty drunk. She usually doesn't drink much at all, a glass of wine at dinner and an occasional beer when we cook out. I haven't seen her this drunk since we were married 9 years ago. Pam was dancing and flirting with all the men, and I think she was trying to make me a little jealous, probably because I told her to take it easy on the booze. Around 10:30 p.m. that night, while talking to friends, I looked around and didn't see Pam. I didn't do anything about it because I assumed she must have gone to the bathroom, but when another 10 minutes passed and she was nowhere to be seen, I got worried. I excused myself from the group I was with and went in search of her. She wasn't in the bedroom, she wasn't in the bathroom, she wasn't in the kitchen either. I was about to go outside when I noticed that the door leading from the kitchen to the basement stairs was ajar. When I opened the door, I saw that there was a light on in the basement, and I thought I heard someone coming down there. I moved as quietly as possible down the stairs. At the foot of the stairs, I peeked around the corner into the large room we used for laundry and storage. There, across the room from where I was standing, were Pam and Mike. Mike was a guy Pam knew from work. Pam had her back against the wall, and Mike was facing Pam and very close to her. With one hand, he was leaning on the wall next to Pam's head. Mike appeared to be talking to her, but I noticed that his right hand was resting on Pam's thigh under the hem of her skirt. I knew I should stop them, but some part of me wanted to watch. Mike continued to move his hand down Pam's body, and her skirt moved with him. When his hand slid further down her thigh, Pam did nothing to stop him. The moment Mike began to undress her, she began to resist. She pushed him away and said, "I can't do this. My husband is upstairs and he will kill me if he catches us." Then Mike said, "Are you saying that if your husband wasn't here, you would have sex with me?" "No, that's not what I mean. I can't do that. I love my husband." "But I bet you'd love it if I did, wouldn't you?" At first, Pam just closed her eyes, but then she opened her eyes again and said, "No, you have to stop." At that point, I decided I had better intervene. I retreated a few steps and called downstairs. "Pam, are you here?" I then noisily made my way down the stairs. When I rounded the corner, Mike and Pam had already dispersed to their rooms. I could see they were both uneasy. Pam whispered, "Mike and I came downstairs to get some more beer." I pretended not to notice their embarrassment and said, "Pam, you better get back. Your friends are already looking for you." As I walked up the stairs, I noticed that Pam hadn't brought her beer with her. I admit that what I saw made me a little concerned, but I was sure it was only because Pam had had a lot of alcohol. I wasn't worried because Pam had never given me any reason to doubt her. Anyway, it turned me on to see her in that state with Mike. Pam hadn't been upstairs more than 5 minutes before she started flirting with another guy. I didn't know that. By then, everyone realized she'd had more to drink than she was used to and found the whole thing quite amusing. By midnight, Pam ran out of gas and collapsed into a chair where she finally fell asleep. After the last guest left, I looked around the house and decided to leave the mess until morning. Then I looked at Pam, who sat unconscious, her makeup a mess, and her dress pulled up over her hips enough that you could see her body. Even drunk and passed out, she was still a sexy woman. I walked over to her to put her to bed, but I couldn't wake her up. I suddenly had an idea of how to teach Pam a lesson for her behavior at the party. My idea also gave me an opportunity to diffuse my arousal. I picked Pam up in my arms and carried her into the guest bedroom. Laying her on the bed, I pulled the bottom of her blouse out from under her skirt and unbuttoned it completely. The bra Pam was wearing was clasped in the front, so I unbuttoned it and freed her breasts from her bra. I went back to our bedroom and undressed, and then went back to the guest room. I sat on the edge of the bed, and as I looked at Pam lying there, dead to the world, I thought, poor Pam is going to miss all the fun. I started having sex with Pam, but she didn't feel anything. Afterward, I stood looking at Pam for a few minutes, thinking that she looked really sexy lying there with no clothes on. When I was done with Pam, I left her with no clothes on and with a trace of sex. My plan was that when she woke up, she would know that she had sex, but she wouldn't know who did it. I went to our bedroom and got ready for bed. As I lay there thinking about Pam lying in bed, I began to think about how I would feel watching her in the basement as Mike caressed her body. I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't stopped them. Would she have let him have sex with her right there against the wall? I tried to put the thought out of my mind and fall asleep, but I couldn't. Still unable to fall asleep, I went downstairs to the guest room and then went back upstairs. This time, when I got into bed, I felt myself falling asleep. At 6 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of the shower in our bathroom. I peeked through the partially ajar bathroom door and saw Pam in the shower. She was rubbing a bar of soap around her body and scrubbing herself vigorously. I watched her rinse off the water and lather up again. When she reached to turn off the water, I quickly went back to bed. When Pam entered the bedroom, I pretended to be asleep. Pam very quietly sank down next to me on the bed. After about 10 minutes, I went back to sleep. At 10 a.m., I awoke to the wonderful smell of coffee brewing and bacon cooking. I got up, threw on my robe, and went into the kitchen. Pam greeted me with a smile and asked, "How are you feeling this morning? You don't have a hangover from last night?" I replied, "Fine. My head is clear and I feel pretty good. How about you?" "I used to feel pretty bad, but I'm fine now." After that, Pam poured me coffee and started frying eggs. Pam kept talking the whole time. She talked about the party and what people were wearing. It was just normal small talk. Pam talked more than usual, but other than that, she didn't seem upset or worried about anything. I decided to tease her a little. I asked her what time she went to bed. She replied, "I don't remember. Didn't I go to bed at the same time you did? What time was that?" Pam looked very calm. I thought this question would stir her up a little more than it turned out to be. I said, "I went to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning when you were still standing at the door supposedly saying goodnight to a couple of guys I didn't know. I expected you to follow me as soon as they left, but I fell asleep before you even got to bed." "How long did they stay?" "Oh, yes, they left about 10 minutes after you went to bed. Then I stayed and started getting things in order. You were already sound asleep when I got to bed, so I didn't wake you up. I just said, 'Oh.'" I couldn't believe how calmly she was lying to me. Deciding to turn up the heat, I went to the closet and pulled out Pam's dirty panties. Back in the kitchen, I held out the panties to Pam and asked, "Can you explain how these panties you were wearing last night ended up on the guest room floor with sex stains?" Pam looked at the panties, then at me with a puzzled expression on her face. For a moment, she was silent. I figured she must be trying to come up with a lie to explain the panties. When she finally spoke, the surprise came to me. Pam looked at the panties again, then at me and said, "You asshole! How dare you have sex with me when I'm asleep? You're pathetic." Then she laughed and said, "How do you want your balls cooked, you pervert? What makes you think I was me?" You almost had me fooled. This morning I actually believed I must have had sex with someone at the party last night while you were asleep. The worst part was that I couldn't remember anything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I must have been so drunk that I must have cheated on you with someone at the party, but I just couldn't remember who. I accepted that fact until you showed up with my panties. When I got up this morning, I looked everywhere for those panties. I thought whoever I had sex with must have taken them. And when you told me you found them in the guest room, I realized you were lying and that you had them all along. Wow. I never thought you'd realize so quickly. Yeah, but I never thought you'd take advantage of me like that. That was vile of me. I guess so, but that's what you thought. The way you were flirting with all the guys last night, trying to make me jealous. I just thought you needed to be taught a lesson. You thought it was a good idea because you weren't thinking with your head as usual. I think I'll go along with it. What choice do I have? but you owe me an apology. No, I don't think so. I think you're the one who owes me an apology. I owe you an apology? For what? I saw you and Mike in the basement. So we didn't do anything. We went down there to get some more beer for the party. I told you about it last night. I saw the two of you when he stuck his hand under his dress. Pam's eyes went wide and tears rolled down her cheeks. She said, "Oh my God. I tried to stop him. I had too much to drink. I was just flirting with him and it got a little out of control. I never would have gotten that far if I hadn't been drunk. Can you ever forgive me?" I replied, "Already forgiven. Now let's eat." After breakfast, I took a shower. When I came out of the bathroom, Pam was lying on the bed in just her panties. When I sat down on the bed with her, she said, "I know you're upset with me, but could you make love to me?" "Sure. After all, you had your sex last night and now you have to give it to me." I replied, "Actually, two." Pam smiled for the first time since I told her I had seen her with Mike and replied, "Well then, you better get started." As I began to make love to Pam, she asked me, "How would you feel if Mike had sex with me last night?" "I'm not sure. I thought about it last night and it turned me on. In fact, the thought of you having sex with another guy turns me on right now. How did you feel this morning when you thought you were actually being used by someone?" At first, I was angry at myself for letting it happen. Then I was scared that I didn't remember anything. And finally, I was really curious about who I had done it with. I thought about all the guys who came to the party without their wives or dates to find out who I had made love to. It was getting me excited. Then I remembered what had happened in the basement and wondered if it was Mike. I never liked Mike, so that really bothered me, but thinking about it turned me on. I was so turned on that when I got out of the shower this morning, I almost woke you up so we could have sex. So the thought of having sex with another man turns you on? I guess so, a little bit. I don't want to cheat on you, but the idea of a one-time affair is a bit of a turn-on. Strangely, this conversation was turning me on. I was starting to feel like I really wanted her to do just that, have sex with another man. So without hesitation, I said, "If the idea of an affair excites you, why don't you do it?" Pam looked surprised. "What?" "The thought of you having sex with someone else really turns me on. If that's what you really want, you have my permission to sleep with another man, but I need to know about everything. I don't want you doing anything behind my back. It's a one-time offer. What do you say?" "I don't know. It's not something I've ever thought about. After all, I'm a married woman and shouldn't be having sex with other men. I'm shocked that you even suggested it. But I have to admit that the idea of such sex excites me. I think we would both need to think hard before doing something like that. We'd have to be absolutely sure that we both want it to happen." I agreed, and we dropped the subject. About 2 months had passed when Pam called me at work one afternoon. She didn't waste any time and got to the point. "Have you thought about the fact that I might be having a sexual affair?" I was stunned. For a moment, I couldn't think of what to say, but then I realized I wanted her to do it. I said, "If you want to do it, I say do it." "When were you going to do it?" Pam replied, "Tonight," and then hung up. I couldn't concentrate on work that day. I kept picturing Pam making love to some guy I didn't know. I could barely hide my arousal from everyone at work. When I got home that night, Pam was standing in our bedroom wearing a black lace bra and panties. When I entered the room, she was already wearing thigh-length stockings. She looked so sexy it took my breath away. I asked her where she was going and who was the lucky guy. Pam replied, "You'll have to wait until I get home tonight to find out the details. For now, how do you like this dress?" Pam slipped into a very short black low-cut cocktail dress that looked like it was made just for her. I said, "If you wear that dress, your friend will do his thing before he even has a chance to touch you." Pam laughed and replied, "Thank you." When Pam finally finished getting dressed, fixing her hair and applying her makeup, I couldn't tell who she looked more like, a movie star or a $1,000-a-day call girl. She was so beautiful and so sexy that I couldn't believe I was going to let her go out looking like that. As Pam got ready to walk out the door, she walked over to the chair I was sitting in and kissed me. Then a devilish expression appeared on her face. She lifted the bottom of her dress and said, "How about kissing my body for good luck?" I leaned forward and kissed her body until Pam stopped me and told me it was time for her to leave. For the first time, I began to regret letting her go. I waited until Pam finally came home at 2 in the morning. Except for a couple of loose strands of hair, Pam looked pretty much the same as when she left. When I saw her, I figured she must not have gone for one reason or another. I felt both relieved and disappointed at the same time. When Pam came over and stood in front of my chair, I asked, "So what happened?" Pam kissed me and replied, "A lot of things happened." Then Pam said, "Let's go to bed and I'll tell you all about it." She took my hand and we walked back to our room. When we got to our room, Pam sat me down on the bed, stood in front of me and said, "Now I'm going to tell you this story. The guy I was with tonight is a salesman who visits our office about once a month. His name is Bob. For the last year, every time Bob has come to our office, he has asked me when I was going to have dinner with him, and I always just laughed and said not this time. Well, when I saw that Bob was coming tonight, I decided that he was going to be my fantasy sex. So when he asked me when I was going to have dinner with him, I said, "How about tonight?" He was shocked. He said, "Really? Will you have dinner with me tonight?" I said I would, and I told him I would meet him at a restaurant in his hotel. Bob didn't know what to say after that. He's the kind of guy who likes to build himself up as a real ladies' man, but he probably rarely succeeds in convincing a woman to go out with him. When I arrived at his hotel, Bob was already waiting for me in the restaurant. I could tell he liked what I was wearing, just like you do. It was hard for him to talk at first, but eventually he said, "You're beautiful." All evening, Bob was an impeccable gentleman. We had a lovely dinner and then went dancing. Around 11:30 p.m., I suggested we go up to his room for a nightcap. Once in his room, Bob asked if he could kiss me, and he kissed me with his tongue, which made my knees go weak. As we kissed, Bob ran his hands under my dress and wrapped his arms around my body, pulling me to him. When we broke the kiss, I told Bob that this would be a one-time thing and that he had to do it the way I wanted, or I would leave. He agreed. I turned to him and told him to unzip my dress and help me out of it. When I got out of the dress, Bob just stood there looking at me with his mouth open. While Pam was saying this, she was taking the dress off. Very carefully folding the dress on the back of a chair, I told Bob to undress. Bob undressed very quickly and was standing in front of me in a moment. I told Bob to take off his bra and put it with the dress. When he unhooked the bra, he asked if he could touch my breasts. I gave him permission. For the next 10 minutes, he fondled and kissed my breasts. Pam removed her bra and continued her story. Then I told him to have sex with me, and he did. Then he had sex with me again, and it was amazing. Before I left, I reminded Bob that it was a one-time thing, and then I kissed him goodnight and went home. By the time Pam finished her story, I wanted to make love to her. Pam said, "I can see my story turned you on, but how would you feel about making love to me after you've already had sex with another man?" I pulled Pam to my bed and started kissing her. I kissed her neck and made my way down to her breasts. It was driving her crazy. After about 5 minutes of teasing, I made love to her, and she loved it. After that, we both went to bed. The next morning, we talked about what had happened the night before, and before we knew it, we were making love again. Afterward, Pam said, "Last night was great. Having sex with a strange man and then making love to you was wonderful. But now you have to make a choice. None of this would have ever happened if you hadn't suggested it in the first place. If you tell me you never want to do it again, I can live with that. But if you ask me to do it again, I can never stop. I just want you to think about that before you ask me if I want to do it again." If I had to give her an answer right now, I would have told her to do it. But I knew I had to think it over carefully. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.